Today, we're going to talk about hacking your cold plunge for maximum benefit. So just like the video I did about hacking your sauna, this is all about how to make it easier, more benefits and cheaper. But I want to just start off right off the bat and say, there's like a balance between benefits and ease. And so what we're going to talk about today isn't about like making it more comfortable just for comfort's sake. One of the main benefits of the cold plunge is doing something that's difficult. But what we're going to be doing is tweaking all the little aspects of getting in, being in, and getting out, and what to do in between all those so that you can, look forward to it as much as possible, get excited about it, get the most benefits for, what you're looking to do in your life. So let's dive right in. So like I said, this is going to be categorized in a few different chapters. We're going to talk about getting in. We're going to talk about what to do when you're in. We're going to talk about how to get out for the most benefit possible. And we're going to talk about safety as well. So, first of all, why cold plunge? Well, there's a lot of scientific evidence about how great it is. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff. I'll tell you what really motivates me to cold plunge, which is, you're in there, your body is doing something called thermogenesis, or creating heat from the inside. That is stimulating the production of mitochondria, which is the energy source of each of the cells. So, your cells having more energy to do all of the different functions that they do, obviously that's going to be hugely beneficial for vitality. It's also great for heart and for circulation. It reduces stress, it improves mood. I'll tell you, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when I talk about temperature, but when I get in the cold plunge, my mood is elevated for the rest of the day. I can sleep a little bit weird, whatever. I get in the cold plunge and I'm just good to go, out of 10 for the whole rest of the day. And that's just a really fantastic benefit. It also improves your CO2 tolerance, which is your body's ability to handle having more CO2, which there are a lot of benefits to that, which I'll talk about later as well. And, part of the thermogenesis, the mitochondria production, is hormone balancing. Your body, when you're really cold, secretes certain hormones and everything just kind of works a lot better. There's an endorphin rush, which has to do with the mood. So this is really the story that got me doing cold plunges and, getting my own setup. So there was a person who was addicted to cocaine, couldn't crack it. Then he started doing cold plunges and he said that this was just as good as cocaine and he could just drop doing cocaine. So I haven't never been a drug person, but to me that was wow, that's a really powerful, because I want longevity benefits. I also want to feel really, really good for every day so that I can show up for my family and my work and myself as the best as possible. And, since then I saw data that shows that the endorphin rush of cocaine, which I assume is what makes people want to do it, it goes up like this and then it drops, and then people want to, they have to keep going like this to maintain that. Whereas for a cold plunge, it goes up like this, but it doesn't drop, and it continues for 10, 14 hours, something like that. So really beneficial. So I have just secretly slipped in hack number 1, which is know why you're cold plunging. And, if you can really motivate yourself for all of the benefits, it might get you over that hump that makes you find excuses and justify not going in the cold plunge that day. And, that day turns into multiple days that week. And, then finally you stop doing it and stop getting the benefits because it's hard, And so if you know the benefits, and, sometimes I'll even I'll be kind of hearing my brain wanting to make justifications to not go in that day. And so I'll start reading about benefits and I'll get motivated that way. So that's hack number 1. Hack number 2 is get on a schedule. So what I have found for myself is not going in 7 days a week, but going in 4 days a week. The Soderbergh-Huberman thing about needing to be in 11 minutes per week. So I cover that by doing 4 4-minute cycles. And there's so many benefits to being on a schedule. So by only going 4 days, so that means I'm not going 3 days. So I'm skipping 2 days at one point in the week. And I really am excited to get back in. So that next day where I'm going in, I'm looking forward to it. It's still hard, but it really makes me want to go in. Whereas I know for myself personally, if I do the same thing day in, day out, it turns into drudgery, it turns into a chore. It can become a good habit, But it was something like this, something that's easy to kind of like justify your way out of. I think that you should limit how much you go in, which might be kind of controversial, but that is how I feel about that. So, the way that I schedule it is that I do sports 3 days a week, and one of those is early morning. I play ultimate frisbee at 8 a.m. And so I find that if I cold plunge before I get up and start doing that, I'm just ready to go. Like I've made a lot more progress on warm up. My body is just like lower inflammation, which is another great benefit of cold plunging. And everything is just looser and I'm just ready to go. I'm going to talk more about this when I talk about getting out of the cold plunge, but there's this rush of energy that happens all throughout my body. And so I go in before my first sporting event on Saturday morning, and then I go Sunday morning because I play on Sunday as well, and I want to, get rid of all the soreness and stuff from Saturday. I go Monday morning to get rid of all the soreness from Sunday, which I play 2 games, and I sometimes get up to 10 miles of sprinting. It's pretty awesome. And then I work out with a buddy on Wednesdays, and so I go in on Thursday as well. So those are my 4 days. Also, I have the cold plunge turned on in a schedule, so I don't have it running all the time. I just have it running for 6 hours to be able to get to the temperature that I want. The night before, I'm going to cold plunge. So for a frugal person like me, when I have electrical expense to get it cold, that also motivates me to do it instead of skipping it, because then it's just I wasted money. So it's, I don't know, it could be pennies, it could be a $1, I don't even know, but it's all about knowing how you work and then getting leverage on yourself to be able to achieve the things that you want to achieve. Yeah, so get on the schedule. You don't want to get frustrated, and you don't want to your cold plunging to be an isolated experience. Okay, moving on. Go in hot. This is super important. So it's obviously going to be the simplest if you have a sauna that you can get in, to go in right before the cold plunge. But if you don't have a sauna, it's fine. You can exercise, do a bunch of push-ups, go for a run, do a bunch of burpees and that kind of thing. So whether you're in the sauna or you're exercising, I like to just get really uncomfortable so that getting in the cold plunge is my best option, right? So as you may know, if you've watched my sauna video, I've hacked my sauna by putting extra heaters in there. It gets to be 170, which for infrared is hot as hell. And so I'm just in there after 20, 30 minutes of sweating. I'm just ready to get out. And so that's another motivator. Also, go in as soon as you can. So what I used to do was I would think, okay, well, I'm going to get out of the sauna. I'm going to take a couple minutes. It's not going to be as big of a shock on my body to go in. I'm going to let my temperature go down a little bit like this. And that was fine. But what I realized is that if I get out of the sauna and I go into the cold plunge as fast as I possibly can, the sauna has heated up my skin, right? It's increased circulation. My blood vessels carrying the hot blood that I have inside of me are up on the surface. So I can get in the cold plunge and it's not as shocking. It doesn't feel quite as cold. So we're going to talk about this in a few of these different hacks. But if you can get in, and it's not as terrible to get in, because getting in is, for me, probably for most people, is the hardest part, right? So once you're in, you can stay there, but getting in is difficult. And so if you can get in and you can overcome that couple seconds of really, really cold, then you can be in there, and the other 3 minutes and 58 seconds or whatever it is, you're getting all those benefits, and you can have the cold plunge be colder, as a result of it. So mine just kicked on for tomorrow, which I'm going to talk about having it on a timer. So you want to go in hot, and you want to go and you don't want to stay hot until you're uncomfortable. So doing burpees, you can go and then, go immediately into the cold plunge when you're doing, after you're doing your burpees. And so that could be a really good motivator as well. Another thing that I do is I've got a smartwatch. I've used Google Pixel, I've used the Samsung Galaxy ones. I know that iWatches or Apple Watches have this feature as well. So when I'm sitting in my sauna, I go to Aqua Aerobics, which is the exercise that I chose that matches the cold plunge as closely as possible. And I hit go. So it's easy to push buttons when you're in the sauna, right? Like you can do all that, but then once the timer's ticking down, well, then you can't just sit there. You have to jump in the sauna as fast as you can. So if you don't have that, you can kind of like come out and be like, oh, I'm gonna wait for the minute, on my clock, or oh, I missed it, I'm gonna wait for the 30 seconds next or whatever, and time can go by. And so like, I just like to take choice out of it, take thought out of it. I go to my thing, I hit it, and then it just kind of forces me to get in. So using a smartwatch, that is hack number 4. Number 5 is the temperature, okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about this with like the entrance to the being in temperature when we're in the being in section. But I want you to be wise about the temperature that you're using. So, obviously there's a mindset where you're like, well, I just want to get in as cold as possible and colder, colder, colder. But that might not be right for you. You really need to look inside, see how you're feeling about things, see the effect on your fight or flight response when you're getting in there. And if you find yourself being like, oh, I don't have time to go in today. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I've got to answer emails or something. Maybe you're going to give up a little bit of the benefits in order to get like all the rest of the benefits, right? So there's also a lot of science about that the benefits, like all of the purported benefits for cold plunging, they happen between 45 and 50 degrees, which, if you've been doing it a little bit, it's not that cold. So if you can just be under 50 degrees, you're good, If you notice when you first start cold plunging, like a lot of people do, that you have this amazing endorphin rush that kind of goes away after time, you get cold adapted and acclimated to the cold. Well, then you can start to turn the temperature down. But if you're getting in there and it's like crazy, stupid cold and you're in there being like, why did I do this? Maybe it's too cold, maybe you can turn it up a little bit. That is hack number 5 is temperature. I'm kind of hypocritical with some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. I do 35 degrees, but it's a lot easier for me now than 60 degrees was when I first started. And I still get those amazing endorphin benefits. So that's why I do that. So what I recommend you do is start at like 60 degrees, 55 degrees, something like that. Go in until you're like, this is kind of boring. Your timer goes off 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever. And you're like, I could stay in here. It's fine. I should have brought a book. Bring the temperature down. You want it to be an active process. But if you're just hating life, you can go up a little bit with the temperature. So next, we're going to talk about being in. Hack number 6 is a filter. It's circulating the water. So my girlfriend has a cold plunge that she got, and it's like a commercially available model. Chiller broke several times. I love my DIY setup back here, but what I noticed when I was in there is that, when I'm in my chamber here, it sort of like, it gets easier and easier the longer that I'm in there. And I thought that was just like me, thermogenesis, creating heat, whatever. But when I'm in her cold plunge, it sort of like doesn't happen. It stays hard. And so I thought about it and I realized, well, she's got an external filter. It's continuing to circulate the air. So when we're in the cold plunge, our body heat is warming up the air around us. And so we've got this sheath of heat around us. So, we can go in at 36 degrees or whatever it is. And then by the time we get out, I raise the temperature in this thing 2 degrees. And so the temperature that's around my body, who knows, 10 degrees more. So, something to think about. So again, if we can circulate the water around us, then maybe it doesn't need to be so cold. Maybe it can be, a little bit warmer, but we're actually getting more benefits, which also helps with the get in process. So say 40 degrees is really shocking on you. Do 45 degrees, make sure that the water is circulating and you're actually having a colder experience, even though it's more comfortable. So like this is a classic example of a way to hack the cold plunge where you're getting more out of it, but it's easier. So that's kind of what we want, because easier is more sustainable, right? And it's like challenging enough. Life is challenging enough. You can find all sorts of ways to challenge yourself, and this is a great one. But that's kind of my ethos these days as I get older. So let's talk about the filter. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in the safety section, but here is my filter right here. It is a canister filter, which is sitting outside of the cold plunge, and then I've got the intake right here, and I've got the jet right here. So that is going whilst I cold plunge, and is, you know, it's kind of like creating the same effect as if I'm moving around in the water, which, you know, I find I don't want to do at all. Like, I sometimes don't even want to get out because I don't want to move, because I'm going to be, you know, disrupting that sheath of heat around me. So that's an indication that circulating the water is going to be kind of a good idea. And so I'm just going to touch on this now so I don't forget in the safety section. But there are a few different ways to circulate the water. They all require electricity being in the water of your cold plunge, which I don't want to have for electrical safety. For example, there's something called a wave maker, which is for aquariums, which I use, but I'm in there and like there's electrical force happening, and supposedly it's super safe, like people's fish don't get electrocuted this way, but you know, it's just something that I think about when I'm in there, and it kind of like stresses me out a little bit, and so I'm not able to really sink in as much. So there could be no danger, but the canister filter is what I chose to do. Number 7, think about or find the thing that makes you want to get out first. The part of your body that gets really uncomfortable and hurts first. For a lot of people, it is the feet. So what I recommend is you use these little scuba footy things, or just use socks, and they keep your feet from getting cold too fast. So, you know, this is again part of this ethos of like, we don't want to make everything really easy and like comfortable and lose out on the benefits. We want to get more benefits by, you know, leveraging our self-awareness so that we can, you know, just get the most out of the situation. So my feet are the first thing that hurt on me when I'm in the cold plunge. So I do this, it makes it easier. I can stay in for longer, you know, and the rest of my body is getting another minute or minute and a half of benefit. My hands also, they can kind of get sort of cold, but my family has Raynaud's syndrome, which means that your fingers and extremities and things are getting cold, and there's a circulation issue. So I find that when I go in the cold plunge, the numbness happens. And so what I have been doing is I've experimented with like keeping them in for half of the time and then bringing them out above the surface of the water for the other half of the time. Though lately I've actually just been keeping them in the whole time, and I've been okay. So, you know, just something to play with. But when I first started, I noticed that my traps, my trapezius muscles here, would really hurt when they were cold for like 30 seconds, and then that pain would go away for some reason. I'm not really sure what that was about, but you know, I'm just trying to inspire you to just have awareness, stay present, and you know, work with your body and with the messages that it's sending you. It's a gift to be getting these messages from your body. So listen to them with awareness. You know, sometimes we need to guide our body just like we would guide a small child. Okay, moving on. Number 8, we've got breath hold. So what to actually mentally do when you're in the cold plunge. So this is something that I started doing naturally, and then looking into it, I saw some really good reasons to do that. So I alluded to the fact before at the beginning of the video that CO2 tolerance increases when using the cold plunge. And there's all sorts of benefits to CO2 tolerance. It means that you can hold more CO2 in your body before your body demands that you exhale it out. So the benefits of this are it's really good for heart, it's really good for circulation, it's good for athletic performance. CO2 actually unlocks the hemoglobin molecule to release oxygen into our cells. It's called Bohr's effect, or Bohr's something like that. And so, generally by holding your breath, you're able to increase your ability to hold your breath. So, I've been doing yoga and breath retention and things like that for many, many years. And so I noticed that when I was in the cold plunge, that I was able to hold my breath for a whole lot longer. I learned about something called the mammalian dive reflex, which is that when mammals get cold water on their face, then it slows down the vascular system and the respiratory system so that we could presumably stay underwater more comfortably. But in this process, like just having the mammalian dive reflex activated means that you are increasing your CO2 tolerance because you don't need to breathe as much. So by doing breath holds in the cold plunge, then you're actually increasing that benefit. And I find that I can hold my breath about 3 times longer when I'm in the cold plunge than when I'm just sitting out doing my regular practice. So the cold plunge, it's kind of stressful, right? And it helps you to relax. It helps you to stay calm in a stressful situation. Holding the breath is a similar situation to that. So, it can help reduce the fight or flight response. It can help you to not sweat the small stuff. And, when I started doing breath retention as like a kid, a teenager, I would notice that there would be this panic that would set in, especially when I'm holding my breath out, like I have no breath inside of me. And I'm be like, okay, JP, there's breath all around you. Like there's air, you can have access to it at any time, just relax, everything's fine. And I would talk to myself like that. And I felt like it really helped me be a lot more relaxed and less stressed in everyday life. I grew up in kind of like a stressful household situation. And so I noticed even as a little kid that I would be holding my breath a lot. Obviously no good. And so just like when cold will push against your ability to create heat, holding your breath makes it easier for you to breathe when you need to, okay? So that's what you do. Well, that's what I recommend you do when you're in the cold plunge. Just a couple of more things about that. When I'm really hot and I get in, I notice that there's like this pressure in the back of my head, which is not dangerous. I was careful about it when I first started observing that, but it's not dangerous, but it'll sort of lead to like the room spinning, which, is another one of those indications of you need to be careful with the breath hold thing. And so the room would be spinning. I noticed that if I look up, then it really helps it not spin. And if I can look at the sky, like usually I sit this way looking at the wall, but if I can sit this way looking at the open door of my shed back here, I can look up at the sky. That helps a ton. When I look up and I look at the sky, the spinning stops immediately. So not that the spinning is bad, but I just feel like, I want to be stable. I don't want to be worried about things. So that's just a couple of other little tips for you, okay? This is hack number 9, and it's a really big one. When people go in the cold plunge, a lot of times, they dunk their face in, but they hold their nose when they do that. So the sensors for the mammalian dive reflex are actually in your nostrils. So don't hold your nose when you're dunking your face, and make sure you go in slow enough so that water can get into those sensors to fully activate the mammalian dive reflex. That is possibly the most important and necessary hack that I'm sharing in this video, so make sure that you pay attention to that and start doing that. So I want to make a disclaimer when I talk about doing the breath holds. It can be really dangerous to do that in the cold plunge because people can pass out, get lightheaded or whatever. So really, really make sure that you're not pushing yourself as much as you would if you were on dry land. You might want to have a person with you to watch you and just make sure that you're safe. Something that I have experimented with is using a neck flotation device. So I'll put this around my neck like this when I'm in the cold plunge, and and it lets me push just a little bit further. And because like when you need to breathe, when your body's telling you to breathe, it's sending you all kinds of signals to do that. And when you're holding your breath, what that means is you're kind of like ignoring increasingly urgent signals. So you have to become really aware of what those signals are, and to make sure that you're being safe. So please, please, please be safe when you're doing this, and get a spotter or something like that. And I really want you to be safe in the cold plunge. We'll talk more about other safety, but I just really want to make sure that I talk about that before I talk about breath holding. So here's what I do. When I get in, I will take a few breaths to stabilize my breathing. Then I'll go from panting and needing a lot of breath to being pretty smoothed out within 2 to maybe 4 breaths. It happens really quickly. When that happens, I'll breathe in for a count of 5, and I'll hold my breath for a count. Again, watching the signals that my body's sending me to breathe, but I also, counting is kind of it's always been a comforting thing for me to do ever since I was a little kid. And then I can also just kind of be aware of what's happening in my body when I know if I'm going to 80 seconds or 90 seconds or 100 seconds or something like that. And just, to kind of be aware. So start slow, and, you can increase as you feel comfortable. So after whatever my hold is, I'll breathe out, and usually I can only breathe out for 5 seconds for whatever reason. When I'm not in the cold plunge, I can do a long exhale. But 5-second breathe out, and then I'll hold my breath out for 10 seconds. And then I'll do it again. You can take a couple breaths in between if you want, or you can just go right into it. And then your second breath, you're not going to be able to hold nearly as long as your first one. And so that's pretty much it. And so then I have time to do 2 breaths in my 4-minute cycle. And then at the end of my second breath, usually halfway through my second breath, I'll get hit by this, I don't know what it is, but it's a strong sense of calm where everything just slows down. And so, I'll just be able to kind of ride that for the rest of my 4 minutes, and just, really slow, gentle breathing or whatever. By the way, when you put your face in, no reason not to leave it in there for 10 or 20 seconds. It will reduce inflammation in your face, which will help with any kind of discoloration, rashes, acne, if you suffer from any autoimmune inspired skin disorders. And it will slow aging by stimulating the production of brown fat and collagen. You can do this multiple times per session. I noticed something in my practice, which is that over time, I've started to feel kind of hot in my body, which I think is thermogenesis, in creating mitochondria through brown fat. But so it's been increasing, and kind of by being there, being present, I can watch the heat rise, and then the cold will sort of win, and then the heat will go away. And over time, the heat will stay longer and longer. The girlfriend that I mentioned, she actually pointed this out to me. She would tell me that she was feeling really hot when she was in the cold plunge. I'd be like, wow, must be nice. But then I started to notice that myself over time. I'm older, and I don't know why, sort of run cold, circulation issues, the Raynaud's thing. So, that could be the reason why it's taken longer for me. But so in the process of learning about this, it reminded me about this story that I heard when I was a little kid of Tibetan Buddhist monks being able to sit in a snowfield and melt the snow around them, and sort of their advancedness in whatever practice this was measured by how far away from them the snow was melted, and 6 feet away they were a master, whatever. So I've looked into this. The process is called Tumo, and interestingly, it's pretty much exactly what I do in the cold plunge. It's breath retention, and then imagining your body as fire. So I will imagine a strong fire, really bright, and I'll actually imagine the sound of a fire as well, starting like in my belly, and the fire spreads throughout my body. And I really try to maintain this like strong fire imagery while I'm counting, and it really helps. So in the Tumo tradition, they talk about this sort of like semi spiritual whatever stuff about like burning through your mental blockages and stuff like that. I don't know about that stuff. But what I do know is that there's scientific benefit to, like having inner strength. In Ayurveda, we talk about having a strong digestive fire, and like if you take leaves, for example, and you throw them on a fire that's not very strong, it'll kind of like sputter and it won't really, burn them up that well. And the smoke will be kind of like dark. But if you throw leaves on a strong, like a hot fire, it'll burn them bright and clean. It won't leave any residue besides a very fine, nice powdery ash. And we want our digestive system to operate the same way. We don't want ama or undigested wastes to remain in our digestive system. We want to burn it all bright and clean. So by having a strong fire inside of our body, digestive fire, metabolic fire, whatever, tons and tons of benefits. And I think about like somebody who's cold and who can like never get warm and is sort of frail, and it's to me it's kind of a sense of disease of the body. Whereas the person who's like warm, they can be in shorts when it's cold, they have this vitality, this vigor. So that's inner fire, and that's one of the things that we can use the cold plunge to develop. We have we can do this practice on a nice summer day, but if you have the pressure of cold against it, then you can strengthen your ability to heat up from the inside. It's like isometric exercise versus actually using weights. Weights are going to be a lot more effective if you have access to them. So Tumo, or picturing and listening to the imagery of fire while you're doing your cold plunge, has myriad benefits, okay? But even more effective than visualizing fire when you're in the cold plunge, I want you to do this. So you have breathed in, you're holding the air inside of your lungs, and you have a pressure inside of you. I want you to send your mind to the place where you're feeling cold creeping in on your skin. Press against the cold. It's kind of like you're lifting weights, right? You have a heavy weight that's getting pulled down by gravity, and you're pulling that up, and that's what's strengthening your muscles. You can also work isometrically, like just squeezing the muscle, but it's not as effective. It works better when you have a resistance. The cold is the resistance by which you develop heat inside of your body and all of the other benefits that come along with that, okay? So you're holding breath inside, you're pressing out against the cold as it is pushing in on you. And it is pretty amazing what I have found from doing this. I don't know how I started doing this, but it's just felt very natural. And so I stopped counting because that was a distraction. Instead, I just stayed present, but I had something to do. But this thing that I have to do, it's like magic. It feels like a Jedi power, because the first time I did this, I was in the cold plunge, pressing out against the cold. And I was convinced that the cold plunge had like turned off or something, and and it hadn't cooled down properly, and it was like 10 or 15 degrees warmer in there because it was effortless for me to be in there. And it's really, really interesting how that works. And I checked it afterwards, and it wasn't. It was still 36 or 37 degrees. But it felt warm. Like I had water, on me from putting my face in. And I was like, is that sweat? Like I feel so hot. It's truly magical. And then in doing this, I actually was like out walking around, and it was cold, and I tried to do it, and I felt my body heat up then as well. So pretty excited about this. I'm pretty new at it, just like in the discovery process, but I'm feeling very like this is like very important information to share. So you're breathing in, you're holding the pressure of the air inside of your lungs, and you're using that outward pressure to press out against the cold, right? When you have to breathe out and hold your breath out. Now you have a negative internal pressure. And at these times, I find that I get really cold really fast. Like I'm sucking the cold in because I don't have the pressure to press out. Maybe if my mind was more attuned or more adept at this practice, I would be able to press out like in any circumstance. But that's what I find. And so like I get in, I'm cold. And then my feeling of heat goes up. And then after like 3 minutes, I can feel the heat, the cold is starting to creep in. And it's kind of interesting like how it goes with my breaths. So I want you to try that. It's pretty incredible. And let me know what you think. This could go in the category of before the cold plunge, but I'm going to talk about it now for reasons that will probably be obvious. If you take a shot of apple cider vinegar in water first thing in the morning before you do your cold plunge, then you're going to already be stimulating that digestive fire. And I found kind of like there's a lot of videos. Thomas DeLauer has one about the benefits of apple cider vinegar first thing in the morning, metabolic benefits. It's great. But so I just started doing that. And then I noticed that on the days that I did that, my ability to generate heat and fire inside of my body were stronger. And then I made the connection, right? It makes sense, like a stronger acidity, stronger digestive fire, ability to create thermogenesis in the body. This is about getting out. So you probably already know that you want to end on cold. So don't cold plunge and then sauna. You want to sauna and then cold plunge because you want to give your body time to do all that thermogenesis and create all that heat. So it happens over a long period of time. It could be, 15 minutes, 60 minutes, even 2 hours where your body is continuing to build that heat, that brown adipose tissue full of mitochondria. And so you want to make sure that you stay cold for as long as you're comfortable. And, if you're getting adept at that tumo, you're also getting out and you're like, okay, I feel totally comfortable right now. Like I don't need to heat up. So you can stay wet because when there's water on your body, it will get rid of the heat off of your skin much more quickly than dryness. I go in early in the morning. It's freaking cold. The cold plunge is cold. So I just dry off, but I make sure that I'm not like going back in the sauna and cheating that way. So I dry off, I put my robe on, and then I go inside the house. Then I do tip number 12, which is exercise. So I've got these rafters here in my shed. And so when I get out of the cold plunge, I grab those rafters and I immediately start doing chin-ups. So I notice that when I get out of the cold plunge, I'm full of energy. I just want to run. Like I'm feeling so great and so energized that I want to put that into some use. So what I used to do was be like, oh, I'm like walking around shivering. I feel terrible. I want to get in the shower. And so I would go in the shower and I would stay in there for way too long and I would warm up that way. And I would cancel a lot of the benefits, It's kind of like I was talking about. Getting in is hard. Being in, not that hard. Getting out and just kind of like going about your day is the easiest of those three things and potentially has the most benefits because you're warming up over like an hour period. And so, it's great for you. So you don't want to cut that off. You want to continue that. But in order to, do something with the energy, in order to warm up from the inside, I will exercise. So I do some chin-ups, I put my robe on, I go inside and I start doing push-ups. Side benefit, which isn't really directly related to the cold plunge, but the fact that I'm now doing push-ups with the energy that I have from the cold plunge, I can do a buttload of push-ups at this point, like 4 times more than I could when I first started. So that's great. And you can do whatever, is good for you. You could jump rope if you have an exercise bike. You could go for a run, like whatever it is. It's going to be really, really easy to do that. Whereas if you wake up, have some coffee, look at the newspaper, whatever, be like, oh, no, I got to do a bunch of push-ups. Like, that's hard. Get out of the cold plunge is easy. So that's a really great opportunity for you to do some calisthenics and get stronger. I'm not talking about like 10 jumping jacks. I'm talking about like really get into it and tire yourself out. You could go right into a full like HIIT workout. YouTube has tons of 10-minute, 15-minute HIIT workouts. Just decide like, okay, I'm gonna turn it on and I'm gonna get started right away. And you're going to want to warm up, so it's going to be an easy time to do that. So that being said, I traditionally hate being cold. It just feels really uncomfortable. It feels like, like it's triggering maybe survival issues in me. But when I get out of the cold plunge, I'm shivering and it just feels healthy. Like like it feels really good to shiver. I don't know what it is. There's just this like really strong sense of vitality that's happening when I'm shivering. So, I've learned that. It's unexpected, and it's just something that, being present and aware for my experience has told me. So that's not something that I have to fear. And so I can take that, in the rest of life if I'm out doing, somewhere cold. Like I know that I actually kind of like being cold, which is shocking. But that's just me. That's just my 2C. Okay, so let's talk about safety a little bit now. So I talked about the neck float. I will link the one that I use. They're like $20 for 2 of them. They're inflatable. My first one popped. So, they don't last forever. There's another one, which was like $35, which was definitely higher quality, but it also was like big and bulky and kind of took up a lot of space, which I didn't love, but it's probably safer. So neck float, even if you're not doing breath retention, if you have like any kind of concern about being in the cold plunge. But most of my safety guidance is going to be about electricity and the risk of an electric issue when you're in the cold plunge, especially a DIY thing like a chest freezer. Okay, so a couple things I'll talk about. First of all, electricity isn't conducted by the H2O molecule of water. It's conducted by the minerals and the electrolytes and salts that are in the water. So if you have a pure RO water in there, it's not conductive, okay? What I do is I have a tube that goes from my RO filter in my house, out my window, into my cold plunge, and so that's just one element of safety. It's also, I obviously don't want chlorine or chloramines or anything like that on my skin if I can help it. So using RO water is hack number 14. Hack number 15, a GFCI outlet. So right here, I've got a plug-in outlet that my cold plunge is attached to. If you have your cold plunge plugged right into the wall, you can replace that outlet with the GFCI outlet. And what that means is that it will trip the outlet very quickly if there's any kind of electrical surge. So I think it's like an 1/8 of a second or something like that. So if there's any kind of issue, something goes wrong with the electricity, then it trips it much more quickly, which is why those are in bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. So use a GFCI outlet, but you want to have a few different layers of defense against having an electrical issue in the cold plunge. Like the girlfriend makes me unplug it when she gets in there, which is totally a great idea and super safe. I don't do that because it's just an extra step. Plus I'm kind of like going from the sauna into the cold plunge, immediately. And so what I do is I have my cold plunge on a Wi-Fi timer. And I alluded to this before with the timing of, getting it cold, so it doesn't have to be cold all the time when I'm not using it. And so I have it timed so that it's off when I'm in there. So that is something that you can do as well. That is tip number 16. And so, you know, the chest freezer is very safe in terms of, you know, any kind of electrical issues. But if there's any kind of issue with the wall, like with like water seeping in or something, the water, if it's not pure water, you know, and it has salts in it, whatever, then it can go through the wall to the electrical components, make a conductive path from those to you. So, you know, like I said, it's plugged into a Wi-Fi timer, which is off, a GFCI outlet, which is also, you know, a layer of protection, but unplugging it is going to be the ultimate in safety. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please drop it in the comments below or let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to see more of. And I'll see you on the next one.